The bright morning sun poured through the windows of Westbrook Elementary School as 10-year-old Zoe Taylor carefully placed her lunch bag in the classroom cubby. Her mom had packed her favorite sandwich today, turkey with just the right amount of mayo, the way only her mom could make it. There was also a small container of fresh strawberries, a homemade chocolate chip cookie, and a little note that always made Zoe smile. "Have a great day, my little star. Love you to the moon and back. Mom." Zoe ran her fingers over the colorful lunch bag her grandmother had given her for her birthday last month. It had pretty flowers and her initials embroidered in the corner. She loved that lunch bag almost as much as she loved what was inside it. The first bell rang and Zoe hurried to her desk, excited about the day ahead. Fourth grade was supposed to be fun. That's what her older cousin had told her. But so far, Westbrook Elementary hadn't been what she expected. Ms. Reynolds, Zoe's homeroom teacher, walked into the classroom with her usual tight smile. She was a tall woman with graying hair always pulled back in a perfect bun. Her clothes never had a wrinkle and her voice never seemed to get warm, even when she was saying nice things. "Good morning, class," Ms. Reynolds said, writing the day's schedule on the whiteboard. "Please take out your math workbooks and turn to page 43. Zoe liked math. She was good at it, and working with numbers made sense to her in a way that some other things didn't. Like why some of the kids at her new school wouldn't play with her at recess, or why Ms. Reynolds always seemed to call on everyone else before her, even when Zoe's hand was the first one up. The morning went by quickly. They had math, then reading, then art class with Mr. Chen, who was Zoe's favorite teacher. He had shown real interest in the detailed drawing she'd made of her family's weekend trip to the lake. Finally, it was time for lunch and Zoe's stomach was rumbling. The lunch bell rang and the students lined up by the door. Zoe stopped by her cubby to grab her lunch bag, but when she reached in, it wasn't there. She checked again, thinking maybe it had been pushed to the back. She even got down on her knees to look underneath the shelf, thinking it might have fallen. But her flowered lunch bag with the embroidered initials was nowhere to be found. "Ms. Reynolds," Zoe said, walking up to her teacher with a worried look. "I can't find my lunch." Ms. Reynolds barely looked up from her desk. "Are you sure you brought one today?" "Yes, ma'am. I put it in my cubby this morning. It's my special bag with flowers on it." Ms. Reynolds sighed like Zoe was causing her a big problem. "You probably left it at home or on the bus. Children can be so forgetful." She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a lunch voucher. "Here, use this in the cafeteria today. Try to remember your lunch tomorrow." But Zoe knew she hadn't forgotten her lunch. She'd put it in her cubby just like she did every day. Still, there was nothing she could do now, except take the voucher and head to the cafeteria with the rest of her class. The school lunch that day was a sad-looking hamburger with a small carton of milk. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't her mom's lunch either. There was no little note, no cookie made with love, no perfectly cut strawberries. Zoe ate quietly while the other kids around her laughed and traded snacks. The next day, Zoe was extra careful. She made sure her mom saw her put the lunch in her backpack. She checked twice that it was still there on the bus ride to school. And when she arrived in the classroom, she placed it securely in her cubby, even pushing it all the way to the back where it would be safe. But when lunchtime came, her lunch was gone again. "Ms. Reynolds, someone took my lunch again," Zoe said, trying hard not to cry. This time, Ms. Reynolds looked annoyed. "Zoe, I don't have time for this." "No one is taking your lunch. You're just being careless." She handed Zoe another voucher. "Here, and please don't make this a habit." As Zoe walked to the cafeteria, she noticed something strange. Ms. Reynolds didn't go to the teacher's lounge like she usually did during lunch. Instead, she stayed in the classroom, door closed. The same thing happened the next day. And the day after that. Each morning, Zoe would carefully place her lunch in the cubby, and by lunchtime it would be gone. Ms. Reynolds always had the same response, that Zoe was being forgetful or careless. The school lunches were never as good as what her mom packed, and Zoe started coming home hungry every day. What made it even stranger was that no one else ever seemed to lose their lunch. Tommy Wilson, who sat next to Zoe and was always forgetting his homework, never lost his lunch. Neither did Lily Chen or Alex Johnson or any of the other kids. Just Zoe. After 2 weeks of this happening, Zoe started to notice something else. The only other student who regularly got lunch vouchers was Deshaun Brown, the only other black student in Ms. Reynolds' class. One day during recess, Zoe approached Deshaun while he was sitting alone on a bench near the playground. "Hi," she said, sitting down next to him. "Do you lose your lunch too?" Deshawn looked at her with surprise. "Yeah, how'd you know?" "Because I lose mine every day." "Do you think someone's taking them?" Deshawn shrugged. "My mom thinks so. She's really mad about it. She works really hard to make my lunches special." "My mom does too," Zoe said. "She puts notes in mine and everything." The two of them sat in silence for a moment, both thinking about their missing lunches and their moms who put so much care into making them. "Have you told your mom?" Deshawn asked. Zoe shook her head. "Not yet. I didn't want her to worry. She's already working so hard since we moved here, but I think I have to tell her now." That afternoon when Zoe got home, her mom was already there, which was unusual. Usually Zoe would go to her neighbor Mrs. Washington's house until her mom got home from work. "Mom, what are you doing home?" Zoe asked, dropping her backpack by the door. Zoe's mom, Tanya, was sitting at the kitchen table looking worried. "I took off early today. Mrs. Washington called me. She said you've been extra hungry after school lately, eating everything she offers you. She was concerned." Tanya patted the chair beside her. "Sit down, baby. Tell me what's going on." Zoe's eyes filled with tears as she sat down. All the frustration of the past 2 weeks came pouring out. "Someone keeps taking my lunch at school, Mom. Every single day. I put it in my cubby in the morning, and by lunchtime it's gone." "What?" Tanya's eyes widened. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't want to worry you. And Ms. Reynolds just says I'm being forgetful, but I'm not, Mom. I'm really not. And it's not just me. It's happening to Deshawn, too. He's the only other black kid in my class." Tanya's expression changed from concern to something harder, something that made Zoe think of how her mom looked when she was dealing with a difficult customer at her job, determined and not about to back down. "And what does Ms. Reynolds do during lunch?" Tanya asked quietly. "She stays in the classroom most days, not like the other teachers who go to the teacher's lounge." Tanya was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then she got up and went to the refrigerator, pulling out ingredients for dinner. "I'm going to make your favorite tonight, mac and cheese with the crispy top." "Really?" Zoe's eyes lit up. Her mom's mac and cheese was the best thing in the whole world. "Really? And tomorrow I'm going to pack you an extra special lunch, and I'm going to have a talk with your principal." As Tanya turned on the oven, Zoe could see her mom's mind working, planning. There was a determination in her movements that made Zoe feel safe. Whatever was happening with the lunches, her mom was going to fix it. That night, Zoe helped her mom make the mac and cheese, grating cheese and stirring the sauce just the way her mom showed her. They talked about school and about Deshawn and about how sometimes people didn't treat others fairly. It was a hard conversation, but Zoe felt better having it. Her mom didn't try to pretend things were simpler than they were. She just listened and explained and promised that she would always be on Zoe's side. "You know what, Zoe?" Tanya said as they sat down to dinner. "Sometimes in life you have to stand up for what's right even when it's hard. Even when grown-ups tell you that you're wrong when you know you're not." Zoe nodded, feeling a little braver just sitting across from her mom, who never seemed afraid of anything. "Tomorrow's going to be different," Tanya promised. "You just wait and see." And as Zoe went to bed that night, full of her mom's delicious mac and cheese and the comfort of knowing she wasn't alone in this anymore, she believed her mom. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow they would find out what was really happening to her lunch. The next morning, Tanya woke up earlier than usual. The kitchen light glowed softly as she prepared Zoe's lunch with extra care. Today's lunch was special. A heart-shaped sandwich with Zoe's favorite turkey and cheese, apple slices arranged in a flower pattern, homemade chocolate chip cookies still warm from the oven, and a small container of strawberries. She tucked a note inside, just like always, but today's message was different. "Be brave, my sweet girl. The truth always comes to light. Love, Mom." Tanya had stayed up late researching school policies and making phone calls. Her friend Val, who worked as a school counselor in another district, had given her advice about how to document everything and who to talk to if the principal didn't take action. Tanya had written it all down in a notebook she'd labeled Zoe's lunch situation in neat block letters across the front. "Mom, why are you up so early?" Zoe asked, rubbing sleep from her eyes as she padded into the kitchen in her fuzzy slippers. Tanya smiled, zipping up the flowered lunch bag. "Just making sure everything's perfect for today. I've got a meeting with Principal Wilson this afternoon." Zoe's eyes widened. "You're really going to talk to him?" "You bet I am." Tanya knelt down to eye level with her daughter. Nobody messes with my baby's lunch, nobody. Zoe wrapped her arms around her mom's neck. What if Ms. Reynolds gets mad at me? Tanya pulled back and looked into her daughter's eyes. Listen to me, Zoe, you haven't done anything wrong. Not one single thing. If anyone should be worried, it's Ms. Reynolds. After breakfast, Tanya walked Zoe to the bus stop instead of just watching from the window like usual. Before Zoe climbed aboard, Tanya handed her a small notebook and pencil. I want you to write down exactly what happens today. What time you put your lunch in the cubby, what time you notice it's missing, who was around, everything you can remember. Can you do that for me? Zoe nodded seriously, tucking the notebook into her backpack. Like a detective? Exactly like a detective, Tanya smiled. And I'm going to be doing some detective work too. As the bus pulled away, Tanya waved until she couldn't see Zoe's face in the window anymore. Then she pulled out her phone and made a call. Val, it's me. I need another favor. At school, Zoe carefully placed her lunch in the cubby, making sure the flowered bag was visible from the classroom. She wrote in her notebook, 8:15 a.m. Put lunch in cubby. Ms. Reynolds was at her desk grading papers. The morning classes went as usual. Ms. Reynolds seemed a bit distracted, checking her watch more often than normal. During the spelling test, Zoe noticed her teacher looking over at the cubby several times. Zoe wrote this down too. At 10:30, they had library time with Mrs. Patel, the school librarian who always wore colorful scarves and told the best stories. While the other kids browsed for books, Zoe sneaked a peek into the classroom through the door window. What she saw made her gasp. Ms. Reynolds was standing by the cubbies, quickly going through Zoe's lunch bag. The teacher pulled out the sandwich, cookies, and fruit, transferring them to a container she'd pulled from her desk drawer. Then she crumpled up the lunch bag and shoved it deep into the trash can under her desk. Zoe's hands shook as she wrote everything down in her notebook. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't forgetful. Ms. Reynolds really was stealing her lunch, and probably Deshawn's too. When they returned from the library, Zoe pretended not to notice anything different. Ms. Reynolds was back at her desk, acting like nothing had happened. Zoe's cubby was empty, just as she expected. At lunchtime, Zoe raised her hand. Ms. Reynolds, my lunch is gone again. The teacher barely looked up. Zoe, we've been through this. You need to be more responsible with your things. She pulled out a lunch voucher and held it out. But this time, instead of taking it, Zoe stood her ground. Ms. Reynolds, I saw you take my lunch during library time. The classroom went silent. Every kid froze, their eyes darting between Zoe and the teacher. Ms. Reynolds's face flushed red. That's a very serious accusation, young lady. I don't appreciate being called a thief in front of the class. I'm not calling you anything, Zoe said, her voice small but steady. I'm just saying what I saw. Ms. Reynolds slammed her hand on the desk. That's enough. Go to the principal's office right now. Zoe's heart pounded as she gathered her things. She made sure to grab her detective notebook. As she walked toward the door, Deshawn caught her eye and gave her a tiny nod of encouragement. Meanwhile, Tanya had arrived at Westbrook Elementary for her scheduled meeting with Principal Wilson. She'd taken the afternoon off work, something she couldn't really afford to do. But this was more important than one half-day's pay. The school secretary, Mrs. Garcia, looked up as Tanya entered the office. Can I help you? I'm Tanya Taylor, Zoe Taylor's mother. I have a 1:30 appointment with Principal Wilson. Mrs. Garcia checked her computer.
Yes, I see that here.
He's just finishing up a phone call. You can have a seat. Tanya sat down, her folder of notes on her lap. She had documented every day Zoe's lunch had gone missing, including descriptions of what had been packed. She'd also written down her conversation with Deshawn's mother, who'd confirmed the same thing was happening to her son. Just then, the office door swung open and Zoe walked in, her face streaked with tears. Zoe? Tanya stood up immediately. What happened, baby? Mom. Zoe ran to her mother and threw her arms around her waist. Ms. Reynolds sent me to the office because I told her I saw her take my lunch. Tanya's eyes narrowed. She looked at Mrs. Garcia. Is Principal Wilson available now? This can't wait. Before Mrs. Garcia could answer, a door opened and Principal Wilson stepped out, a tall man with kind eyes and a worried expression. Mrs. Taylor? I heard voices. Is everything okay? No, it's not, Tanya said firmly. My daughter has been having her lunches stolen for weeks now, and she just caught her teacher in the act. Principal Wilson looked alarmed. These are serious allegations. Please come into my office, both of you. Once they were seated, Zoe told the principal everything she had seen reading from her notebook. Tanya then shared her documentation, including the pattern that only Zoe and Deshawn, the only black students in the class, were experiencing these lunch disappearances. Principal Wilson listened carefully, his expression growing more troubled with each detail. I'm very concerned about what you're describing. This is completely unacceptable behavior if true. If true? Tanya's voice was sharp. My daughter isn't lying. I understand your feelings, Mrs. Taylor, but I need to follow proper procedures. I can't simply take action based on one report without investigating. Then investigate, Tanya said, her patience wearing thin. Look in Ms. Reynolds' desk drawer right now. According to Zoe, that's where she put the food from today's lunch. Principal Wilson hesitated, then nodded. All right, let's go to the classroom. It's lunchtime, so Ms. Reynolds should be in the teacher's lounge. The three of them walked to room 23. The classroom was empty, the children all at lunch. Principal Wilson went straight to Ms. Reynolds' desk and opened the top drawer. There, nestled between stacks of papers, was a container with a half-eaten heart-shaped sandwich, apple slices, and cookies. Exactly what Tanya had packed for Zoe that morning. Principal Wilson's face hardened. Mrs. Taylor, I owe you and Zoe an apology. This is completely unacceptable. I'm going to need you both to write formal statements, and then I'd like to call Deshawn's parents as well. Tanya nodded, putting her arm around Zoe's shoulders. We'll do whatever is needed. But I want to make sure Ms. Reynolds doesn't set foot in this classroom again. I need to follow district procedures, but I assure you she won't be teaching today. We'll arrange for a substitute immediately. He knelt down to Zoe's level. I'm very proud of you for speaking up. That took real courage. Zoe looked up at her mom, who nodded encouragingly. I wrote everything down just like Mom told me to. Principal Wilson smiled. You did exactly the right thing. Now are you hungry? Let's get you some lunch while your mom and I talk about next steps. As they left the classroom, they ran into Val, Tanya's friend who worked as a school counselor in the neighboring district. She was standing in the hallway talking to Mrs. Garcia. Val? Tanya was surprised. What are you doing here? Val smiled. You sounded so worried on the phone this morning. I called in a favor and took the afternoon off. Thought you might need some moral support or a professional witness. She glanced at Principal Wilson. I'm Valerie Johnson, school counselor at Parkside Elementary. Principal Wilson shook her hand. Your timing is perfect, Ms. Johnson. We've just uncovered a very troubling situation. While Zoe went with Mrs. Garcia to get some lunch, the adults gathered in Principal Wilson's office to discuss what had happened and what would happen next. Val took notes and offered her professional perspective on how the school should handle the situation, both in terms of disciplining Ms. Reynolds and supporting the affected students. This isn't just about stolen lunches, Val pointed out. This is a clear case of racial targeting. The only 2 black students in the class were the only ones having their lunches disappear. That's not a coincidence. Principal Wilson nodded gravely. I understand and I agree. This will be treated with the seriousness it deserves. By the end of the meeting, a plan was in place. Ms. Reynolds would be placed on immediate administrative leave pending an investigation. A substitute teacher would take over the class, and the school counselor would conduct sessions with the students to discuss what had happened in age-appropriate ways. Most importantly, both Zoe and Deshawn would receive support and monitoring to ensure they felt safe and heard. As Tanya and Zoe walked home that afternoon, Tanya had decided they both deserved the rest of the day off. Zoe looked up at her mom. Mom, are you mad that I got sent to the principal's office? Tanya laughed and squeezed her daughter's hand. Baby girl, I have never been prouder of you than I am today. You stood up for yourself. You told the truth even when an adult was trying to make you doubt yourself. That takes real strength. Zoe smiled, feeling taller somehow. Ms. Reynolds looked really scared when Principal Wilson found my lunch. She should be scared. What she did was wrong, and now she has to face the consequences. As they reached their apartment building, Tanya stopped and knelt down to look Zoe in the eyes. I want you to remember something. No matter what happens tomorrow or the next day or any day after that, I will always believe you and I will always have your back. Always. Zoe threw her arms around her mother's neck. I love you, Mom. I love you too, baby. Now what do you say we order pizza tonight to celebrate your bravery? Zoe's eyes lit up. With extra cheese? With extra everything. Tanya laughed, unlocking their door. Today had been a victory, but Tanya knew the fight wasn't over yet. There would be meetings and paperwork and probably some difficult conversations ahead, but for tonight, they would celebrate the fact that the truth had finally come to light. The next morning, Zoe felt a mix of nervousness and excitement as she got ready for school. She wondered what would happen now that Ms. Reynolds had been caught. Would the other kids treat her differently? Would the new teacher be nice? "You're awful quiet this morning," Tanya said as she packed Zoe's lunch, a peanut butter and banana sandwich, carrot sticks, grapes, and a small slice of the chocolate cake they'd baked together the night before. "Worried about today?" Zoe nodded, pushing her cereal around in the bowl. "What if nobody believes me? What if they think I made it all up?" Tanya put the lunch in Zoe's backpack herself today. Principal Wilson saw the evidence with his own eyes. "And you have your notebook with all your detective notes. Besides," she added with a smile, "I'm coming to school with you this morning." Zoe's eyes widened. "You are?" "Yep. Principal Wilson and I agreed it would be good for me to be there when he talks to the class about what happened and introduces the substitute teacher." On the bus ride to school, Zoe sat next to Deshawn, who had heard some of what happened from his parents. "My mom was so mad when she found out," Deshawn said. "She called the school last night and talked to Principal Wilson for a long time." "My mom did too," Zoe replied. "She says we might need to talk to the school board." Deshawn looked impressed. "What's that?" "They're like the bosses of all the schools," Zoe explained, repeating what her mom had told her. "They make the big decisions." When they arrived at school, Tanya was already waiting in the office. She gave Zoe a big hug. "Ready, brave girl?" she asked. Zoe took a deep breath and nodded. Principal Wilson led them to room 23, where the students were already seated. A woman with curly gray hair and bright red glasses stood at the front of the classroom. She had a kind smile that immediately made Zoe feel a little better. "Good morning, everyone," Principal Wilson said. "I'd like you to meet Mrs. Winters. She'll be your teacher for the rest of the week while we sort some things out." The students murmured hellos. A few of them stared at Zoe with curious expressions. "I also want to introduce Mrs. Taylor, Zoe's mom. She's here because we need to talk about something important that's been happening in this classroom." Tanya gave a small wave, her eyes scanning the room. She noticed Deshawn sitting near the back, his parents on either side of him. They nodded to each other in silent understanding. Principal Wilson continued, his voice gentle but serious. "Yesterday we discovered that some students' lunches have been disappearing because they were being taken by an adult." The classroom erupted in whispers. One boy raised his hand. "You mean Ms. Reynolds was stealing lunches?" Principal Wilson nodded. "Yes, and that's why she's not here today. What she did was wrong, and the school is taking it very seriously." A girl with pigtails spoke up without raising her hand. "But why would a teacher steal kids' lunches?" "That's so weird." The adults exchanged glances. "How do you explain adult prejudice to 10-year-olds? Deshawn's father stood up. He was a tall man with a deep voice that commanded attention. "Sometimes people don't treat others fairly because of the color of their skin. It's called discrimination, and it's something my family has dealt with many times." "But that's not right," said the boy sitting next to Zoe. "My dad says you should judge people by what they do, not what they look like." "Your dad is absolutely right," Tanya said. "And that's why we're all here today. Because what happened to Zoe and Deshawn wasn't right, and we're making sure it stops." Mrs. Winters stepped forward. "I want all of you to know that in this classroom, everyone will be treated with respect and fairness. If you ever see something that doesn't seem right, I want you to feel safe telling me or another adult you trust." After answering a few more questions, the adults left the children with Mrs. Winters to start their day. In the hallway, Principal Wilson turned to the parents. "Thank you all for handling this so well with the children. Now, if you'll come to my office, we need to discuss next steps." In the principal's office, they were joined by Dr. Chen, the district superintendent, who had driven over as soon as she heard what had happened. She was a no-nonsense woman with short black hair and a reputation for fixing problems quickly. "First, let me say how sorry I am that this happened to your children," Dr. Chen said. "There is absolutely no place for this kind of behavior in our district." "What's going to happen to Ms. Reynolds?" Deshawn's mother asked. She was a lawyer, and Tanya was grateful to have her expertise in the room. Dr. Chen's expression was grim. "She's been placed on administrative leave while we conduct a full investigation. Based on what we've already uncovered, I don't expect her to return to teaching in this district." "What about the other staff?" Tanya asked. Did no one notice what was happening all these weeks? Principal Wilson looked uncomfortable. That's part of what we're investigating. There were apparently some rumors among the lunch staff, but no one reported anything officially. That's a problem in itself, Deshawn's father pointed out. If the staff isn't reporting suspicious behavior, what else might be going on that we don't know about? Dr. Chen nodded. You're absolutely right. We're implementing additional training for all staff, starting next week. But we also want to hear from you. What else do you think we should do to make this right? For the next hour, the parents and administrators talked through various ideas. Diversity training for teachers, a new system for reporting concerns, regular check-ins with students about their experiences, and a district-wide review of disciplinary actions to look for patterns of racial bias. I also think there should be a public acknowledgement, Tanya said, not to shame anyone, but to show that the district takes this seriously and to let other families know they should speak up if something similar happens to them. Dr. Chen made notes on her tablet. I agree. I'll draft a statement today. As the meeting wrapped up, Deshawn's mother handed Tanya her business card. Call me if you need anything. Parents have to stick together. Tanya smiled gratefully. Thank you. It means a lot not to be fighting this alone. Meanwhile, in Mrs. Winter's classroom, the day was going surprisingly well. The new teacher had a different style than Ms. Reynolds. Warmer, more engaging, and she called on everyone equally. During art time, she walked around the room complimenting each student's work, including Zoe's and Deshawn's. At lunchtime, Mrs. Winters made a point of walking with the class to the cafeteria and watching as each student got their lunch from their cubby. Zoe felt a surge of joy as she pulled out her still-there lunch bag and found everything exactly as her mom had packed it. Is your lunch all good today? Mrs. Winters asked with a kind smile. Zoe nodded. Yes, ma'am. Everything's here. I'm glad to hear it. And Zoe, I want you to know how brave I think you were. It takes courage to speak up when something isn't right. After school, Tanya was waiting to pick Zoe up instead of having her take the bus. As they walked home together, Zoe couldn't stop talking about Mrs. Winters and how different the day had been. She let us work in groups, Mom. And she didn't get mad when I asked questions. And at lunch, my food was actually there. Tanya laughed, her heart full of relief. That's how school should be, baby. You deserve teachers who care about you and treat you fairly. Is Mrs. Winters going to be our teacher forever now? I'm not sure. She's a substitute, which means she fills in when regular teachers can't be there. But Principal Wilson is looking for a permanent replacement for Ms. Reynolds. As they turned the corner onto their street, they spotted a news van parked near their apartment building. A woman with a microphone was talking to a camera. Mom, why are there news people here? Zoe asked, suddenly nervous. Tanya's phone buzzed with a text from Val. Heads up. Story leaked to press. Reporter looking for you. Don't talk to them without thinking it through. Tanya quickly turned around, steering Zoe in the opposite direction. Let's go get ice cream first. I think we need to talk about some things. At the ice cream shop a few blocks away, Tanya explained while Zoe dug into a sundae with extra sprinkles. When something important happens, sometimes the news wants to tell people about it. Someone told them about what happened with Ms. Reynolds, and now they want to talk to us about it. Zoe's eyes widened. Like on TV? Maybe. But we don't have to talk to them if we don't want to. It's completely up to us. Zoe thought about this while eating a spoonful of ice cream. Would it help other kids if we did? Kids like me and Deshawn? Tanya felt a surge of pride at her daughter's question. Even after everything she'd been through, Zoe was thinking about others. It might, Tanya admitted. If other families hear about what happened, they might recognize similar things happening to their kids. And schools might be more careful about making sure teachers treat all students fairly. Then I think we should do it, Zoe said decisively. But only if you're there with me. Always, Tanya promised. I'll always be right by your side. When they finished their ice cream, Tanya called Val to ask for advice about handling the media. Then she called Deshawn's parents to coordinate their response. By the time they walked back to their apartment, they had a plan. The news van was still there, but now Principal Wilson was also present, talking to the reporter. He looked relieved when he saw Tanya and Zoe approaching. Mrs. Taylor, I was just explaining to Ms. Rivera here that we have a process for press inquiries, and that families' privacy needs to be respected. The reporter, a woman with a sharp blazer and determined expression, turned to Tanya. Mrs. Taylor, we'd love to hear your family's side of this story. Our viewers would be very interested in learning about this troubling incident at Westbrook Elementary. Tanya put her arm around Zoe's shoulders. We're willing to share our experience, but on our terms. We'll do one interview tomorrow afternoon, with both affected families present, and with a representative from the school district to discuss the steps being taken to address the situation. Ms. Rivera looked like she wanted to argue, but then nodded. That's reasonable. Can we set that up now? As they worked out the details, Zoe leaned against her mother, suddenly tired from the emotional day. But there was something else too, a feeling of strength she hadn't known before. She had spoken up, adults had listened, and things were changing. For the first time since starting at Westbrook Elementary, she was actually looking forward to going to school tomorrow. The next day at school felt different. As Zoe walked through the hallways, she noticed other students watching her, some whispering behind their hands. A few older kids she didn't even know smiled at her or gave her thumbs up. Word had spread quickly about what had happened with Ms. Reynolds. In the classroom, Mrs. Winters had rearranged the desks into small groups instead of rows. I think we learn better when we can see each other's faces, she explained. She put Zoe and Deshawn in different groups, but Zoe didn't mind. Her group included Lily, who was always nice, and Tyler, who was really good at math and had offered to help her with yesterday's homework. At lunchtime, something unexpected happened. As Zoe opened her lunch bag, she found not only what her mom had packed, a thermos of chicken noodle soup, crackers, an orange, and cookies, but also a small paper bag she didn't recognize. Inside were 3 homemade brownies with a note. "You're so brave." From Lily's family. Zoe looked across the table where Lily sat with her lunch. Lily gave a shy wave. "My mom saw the news last night. She said what happened to you wasn't fair, and she wanted to do something nice." Zoe felt a warm glow inside as she shared the brownies with Lily and her other table mates. It felt good to know people cared. After school, Tanya picked up Zoe early. "We need to get ready for the interview," she explained as they walked to the car. "Deshawn and his parents are meeting us at the district office at 4 o'clock. "Are you nervous, Mom?" Zoe asked, buckling her seatbelt. Tanya smiled as she adjusted the rearview mirror. "A little bit. But sometimes being nervous just means you're doing something important." At home, they picked out their clothes carefully. Nice but comfortable. Tanya helped Zoe brush her hair and tied it back with her favorite blue ribbon. They practiced some of the questions the reporter might ask, with Tanya reminding Zoe that she didn't have to answer anything that made her uncomfortable. "Just tell the truth. Exactly how you remember it," Tanya said. "Your story is powerful all by itself." The district office was a large building downtown that Zoe had never visited before. Inside, they were led to a conference room where Deshawn and his parents were already waiting. Along with Principal Wilson, Dr. Chen, and a woman Tanya introduced as Ms. Diaz, the district's communications director. "The reporter and her camera operator will be here soon," Ms. Diaz explained, handing out bottles of water. "We've agreed on the general topics for discussion, and I'll be here the whole time to make sure everything goes smoothly." Deshawn looked as nervous as Zoe felt. He was wearing a button-up shirt and had his hair neatly combed. His mom kept straightening his collar. "It's okay to be scared," Zoe whispered to him while the adults talked. "My mom says it just means we're doing something important." Deshawn nodded. "My dad says the same thing. He says we're making history." Before Zoe could ask what he meant by that, the door opened and Ms. Rivera walked in with a man carrying a large camera. They spent some time setting up lights and microphones, which was more complicated than Zoe had expected. The camera operator showed Zoe and Deshawn how the different pieces of equipment worked, which helped ease their nervousness. Finally, everything was ready. Ms. Rivera sat across from them, her expression serious but kind. "Thank you all for agreeing to this interview," she began. "I know this isn't easy, but it's an important story that needs to be told." The camera's red light came on, and the interview began. Ms. Rivera asked questions about what had happened, starting with simple ones for Zoe and Deshawn, about when they first noticed their lunches missing. Then she asked the parents about how they discovered what was happening and what actions they took. Tanya explained how she had taught Zoe to document everything and how proud she was when Zoe stood up to Ms. Reynolds. Deshawn's father talked about the pattern of discrimination they had recognized and why it was important to address it directly. "This isn't just about stolen lunches," he said, his deep voice steady. "It's about making sure our children feel safe and valued at school." regardless of their race. Principal Wilson described finding the evidence and the immediate steps the school had taken. Dr. Chen outlined the broader changes being implemented across the district. We've already scheduled comprehensive bias training for all staff, she explained, and we're establishing a new system for reporting and investigating concerns about unfair treatment. When it was Zoe's turn to speak again, she felt surprisingly calm. She described how it felt to be told day after day that she was just being forgetful when she knew she wasn't. It made me feel like maybe I was crazy, she admitted, like I couldn't trust what I knew was true. And how do you feel now? Ms. Rivera asked gently. Zoe thought for a moment. Stronger, she said finally. Like I know I can speak up when something's wrong, and people will listen. After about 45 minutes, the interview wrapped up. Ms. Rivera thanked everyone and promised the story would air on the evening news. You both did amazingly well, she told Zoe and Deshawn. You should be very proud of yourselves. As they were packing up to leave, Dr. Chen approached Tanya with an unexpected question. Mrs. Taylor, would you and Zoe be willing to speak at the school board meeting next week? I think your experience would help the board understand why the changes we're proposing are so important. Tanya looked at Zoe. What do you think, honey? It would be another chance to tell your story, but to the people who make the big decisions for all the schools. Zoe thought about how it had felt to share her experience today. Scary at first, but then empowering. Will it help make sure this doesn't happen to other kids? Dr. Chen nodded. That's exactly why I'm asking. Then yes, Zoe said firmly. We'll do it. That evening, Tanya invited Deshawn's family over to watch the news story together. They ordered pizza and made a big bowl of popcorn, turning it into a small celebration of the children's bravery. When the story aired, it was even better than they had hoped. Ms. Rivera had put together a thoughtful piece that explained the situation clearly without sensationalizing it. She included statistics about racial disparities in school disciplinary actions and quotes from education experts about the importance of addressing bias in schools. The camera had captured Zoe's and Deshawn's sincerity as they told their stories, and the determination in their parents' faces as they advocated for their children. The piece ended with Dr. Chen's commitment to making systemic changes throughout the district. We have a responsibility to ensure that every child feels safe, respected, and valued in our schools, she said. What happened to these students has shown us where we've fallen short, and we're committed to doing better. After the segment ended, Deshawn's mother turned to Tanya. This is going to make a difference, she said. Not just for our kids, but for others too. The phone started ringing almost immediately. Friends, family members, and neighbors called to offer support and congratulations. Tanya's sister called from 2 states away, crying because she was so proud. Zoe's former teacher from her old school sent a text saying she'd seen the news and wasn't surprised that Zoe had shown such courage. But the most surprising call came from Mrs. Washington, their elderly neighbor who had looked after Zoe after school before all this happened. There's something you should see, she said. Turn on Channel 7. They switched channels to find another news station running their own version of the story. This one included interviews with other families from across the city who had come forward with similar experiences after seeing the first report. It's happening at other schools too, Deshawn's father said quietly. This is bigger than we thought. Just as the segment ended, there was a knock at the door. Tanya opened it to find Mrs. Winters, their substitute teacher, standing there with a large bakery box. I hope I'm not intruding, she said hesitantly. I saw the news and wanted to bring something to celebrate how brave these children have been. She handed over the box, which contained a cake decorated with the words, Courage Speaks Truth in bright blue frosting. Tanya invited her in, and soon the living room was filled with conversation about what was happening and what might come. Next, Mrs. Winters revealed that she had been offered the permanent teaching position for their class and had accepted. The first thing I want to do is work with the students to create a classroom charter about how we treat each other, she explained. I want them to feel ownership over making their classroom a fair and kind place for everyone. As the evening went on, more neighbors stopped by, having seen the news. Some brought food or drinks, others just came to offer support. What had started as a small gathering turned into an impromptu community meeting, with people sharing stories and suggestions for making the school better. Zoe sat on the floor with Deshawn, eating cake and listening to the adults talk. It was well past her bedtime, but Tanya hadn't said anything about going to sleep yet. "Do you think we changed things?" Deshawn asked quietly. Zoe looked around at all the people who had come together because of what they had experienced and spoken up about. "I think we started something," she said, "and I don't think it's finished yet." Later, as Tanya tucked her into bed, Zoe was still thinking about everything that had happened. "Mom, remember how your note said the truth always comes to light?" Tanya smiled, smoothing Zoe's hair back from her forehead. "I remember. It did come to light. But we had to help it, didn't we? By speaking up and not giving up." "That's exactly right," Tanya said. "The truth needs brave people to stand up for it sometimes." She kissed Zoe's forehead. "Get some sleep now. We've got a busy week ahead, with the school board meeting and everything else." As Zoe drifted off to sleep, she felt different than she had just a few days ago. Stronger, braver, more sure of herself. Whatever happened next, she knew she could handle it, especially with her mom, Deshawn's family, Mrs. Winters, and now a whole community standing beside her. The week following the news interview passed in a blur for Zoe. At school, things were better than they had ever been. Mrs. Winters had brought a fresh energy to the classroom, and the students were responding well to her teaching style. She started each day with a short class meeting where students could share their thoughts or concerns, and she made sure everyone had a chance to speak if they wanted to. Zoe's lunch remained safe in her cubby each day, and she noticed other small changes too. The principal stopped by their classroom more often just to check in. The school counselor, Mr. Rivera, came to talk with the class about treating everyone fairly and speaking up when something didn't seem right. And Zoe found herself with more friends than before, kids who had seen her on the news or heard about what happened and admired her courage. At home, Tanya was busier than ever. She had connected with parents from other schools who had similar stories, and they were forming a group to address discrimination district-wide. They had Zoom meetings in the evenings after Zoe went to bed, and sometimes Tanya would still be up typing emails when Zoe woke up for school. "Mom, you need to sleep more," Zoe said one morning, finding Tanya at the kitchen table with dark circles under her eyes. Tanya smiled tiredly. "I know, baby, but this work is important, and we've got the school board meeting tonight." The school board meeting. Zoe had been trying not to think about it too much because it made her stomach flutter with nervousness. Speaking on the news had been scary enough, but this felt even bigger somehow. "What if I mess up?" Zoe asked as Tanya packed her lunch. "What if I forget what I'm supposed to say?" "Just speak from your heart," Tanya said, tucking a note into the lunch bag. "Tell them what happened and how it made you feel. That's all anyone is asking you to do." Zoe nodded, but the nervous feeling stayed with her all day at school. During their morning meeting, Mrs. Winters must have noticed because she pulled Zoe aside during art time. "I heard you're speaking at the board meeting tonight," she said, helping Zoe with her painting of the class pet, a hamster named Whiskers. "That's a big responsibility." "I'm scared," Zoe admitted. "There will be so many grown-ups watching." Mrs. Winters added a dab of white paint to give Whiskers' eye a lifelike shine. "You know what helps me when I'm nervous about speaking to a group? I remind myself that I'm just telling my story, and no one knows my story better than me." That made sense to Zoe. No one could tell her she was wrong about her own experiences. "And," Mrs. Winters added with a smile, "I'll be there tonight too, supporting you from the audience." After school, Tanya helped Zoe get ready for the meeting. They had decided Zoe would wear her favorite blue dress, the one with pockets that her grandmother had given her for her birthday. Tanya wore a crisp white blouse and black pants that she usually saved for job interviews. "You look so pretty, Mom," Zoe said, as Tanya put on her silver hoop earrings. "Thank you, baby. I want to look professional tonight. First impressions matter." She knelt down to Zoe's level. "But what matters even more is what we say and how we say it. We're not just representing ourselves tonight. We're speaking for all the kids who've been treated unfairly, but didn't have a chance to tell their stories." The school board meeting was held in a large room at the district office. Rows of chairs faced a long table where 7 adults sat with nameplates in front of them. There were microphones on the table and a podium at the front of the room where speakers would stand. The room was more crowded than Zoe had expected. She recognized Deshawn and his parents, Principal Wilson, Dr. Chen, and Mrs. Winters. But there were many other people too. Parents and teachers from other schools, community members, and even a few reporters with notebooks and cameras. Dr. Chen had explained that Zoe and Tanya would speak during the public comment portion of the meeting, after the regular business was concluded. So they sat quietly while the board discussed budgets and building repairs and other things that didn't seem very interesting to Zoe. Finally, the board president, a woman with silver hair and glasses, announced, "We'll now move to public comments regarding the proposed changes to the district's anti-discrimination policies." Dr. Chen went first, outlining the situation at Westbrook Elementary and the broader issues it had brought to light. She explained the changes she was proposing: more thorough background checks for teachers, regular training on bias and cultural sensitivity, a new system for reporting and investigating complaints, and the formation of a diversity and inclusion committee with parent representatives from each school. When she finished, the board president called Tanya and Zoe to the podium. Tanya went first, her voice strong and clear as she described what had happened to Zoe and how it had affected her daughter. No child should ever have to doubt themselves because an adult in a position of authority is treating them unfairly, she said, and no child should feel singled out because of their race. Then it was Zoe's turn. She was so short that Dr. Chen had to bring over a small step stool for her to stand on to reach the microphone. Zoe took a deep breath, remembering what Mrs. Winters had said. "No one knows my story better than me. My name is Zoe Taylor and I'm 10 years old," she began, her voice small but steady. "A few weeks ago, I started noticing that my lunch was disappearing from my cubby every day." As she told her story, the missing lunches, Ms. Reynolds' dismissals, her mom's support, and finally catching the teacher in the act, Zoe noticed the board members leaning forward, their faces serious and attentive. "It made me feel like I was invisible," Zoe said, "like what happened to me didn't matter. But my mom taught me that it did matter and that I should speak up when something isn't right." She looked at Tanya, who gave her an encouraging nod. "I don't want any other kid to feel the way I felt," Zoe continued. "I want teachers to be fair to everyone, no matter what they look like. And I want kids to know they should tell someone if they're being treated unfairly." When she finished, there was a moment of silence, and then the room filled with applause. The board president thanked Zoe for her bravery and assured her that the board took her experience very seriously. Deshaun spoke next, his voice quieter than Zoe's, but his words just as powerful. Other parents followed, some sharing similar experiences, others expressing support for the proposed changes. Teachers spoke too, including Mrs. Winters, who emphasized the need for more training and resources to help educators recognize and address their own biases. The meeting went on for over 2 hours, but Zoe stayed alert the whole time, listening to each speaker. It felt important to hear everyone's stories and ideas. Finally, the board voted unanimously to adopt Dr. Chen's proposed changes. With a few additions suggested by parents and teachers during the meeting, they also voted to form a special task force to address racial bias in the district, with both Tanya and Deshaun's mother invited to serve as parent representatives. As people began to leave, many stopped to speak to Zoe and Tanya, offering words of support or thanks. A woman Zoe didn't recognize knelt down to her level. "My daughter goes to Parkside Elementary," she said. "After I saw you on the news, I asked her some questions and found out her teacher has been treating the Spanish-speaking kids differently. I might not have noticed if you hadn't been brave enough to tell your story. Thank you." On the drive home, Zoe was quiet, processing everything that had happened. It was late, well past her bedtime, but she didn't feel tired. "You're thinking hard about something," Tanya observed, glancing at her daughter in the rearview mirror. "I was just wondering what happened to Ms. Reynolds," Zoe said. "No one talked about that tonight." Tanya was quiet for a moment before answering. "The district is still investigating, but I heard from Principal Wilson that she's no longer employed by any school in our area. She's also been required to attend special training before she can apply for another teaching job. Do you think she'll change? Learn to be fair to everyone?" "I hope so," Tanya said. "People can change when they're shown that what they're doing is wrong and are given a chance to learn better ways." When they got home, it was almost midnight, but Tanya let Zoe have some hot chocolate before bed as a special treat. They sat at the kitchen table, mugs warming their hands. "I'm so proud of you," Tanya said. "You know that, right?" Zoe nodded. "I'm proud of us. We did this together. That's right, we did. And we made a difference." The next morning, Zoe found a surprise waiting in her backpack as she got ready for school. A brand new lunch bag. This one was even prettier than her old one, with sparkly stars and her name embroidered in bold letters. Inside was a note in her mom's handwriting. For my brave girl who changed her school for the better. Your voice matters. Your feelings matter. You matter. Love always, Mom. At school, things continued to improve in the weeks and months that followed. Mrs. Winters became their permanent teacher, and the classroom felt like a different place under her guidance. Warmer, more fair, more like a community where everyone belonged. The Diversity and Inclusion Committee that Dr. Chen had proposed became a reality, with regular meetings that sometimes included students as well as adults. Zoe and Deshawn were invited to share their ideas, and they helped create a new lunch buddy program that made sure no student ever ate alone. One day in spring, almost 6 months after the lunch incident, a photographer from the local newspaper came to take pictures of Westbrook Elementary's newly painted mural. The students had designed it themselves with Mrs. Winters' guidance. It showed children of all colors holding hands around the words, "Everyone belongs here." As the photographer arranged the students in front of the mural, he asked Zoe to stand in the center. "You're the one who started all this, right?" he asked. "The girl who spoke up?" Zoe shook her head. "I didn't do it alone," she said, pulling Deshawn to stand beside her and motioning for the other students to join them. "We all made this happen together." And as the camera flashed, capturing the smiling faces of children who now felt safe and valued at their school, Zoe knew that this was just the beginning of what they could accomplish when they raised their voices for what was right.